What if the modern health crisis we accept as normal was actually triggered by a single dietary shift that began over a century ago?
Welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. Stay informed with quick, easy-to-listen summaries of our latest articles, perfect for when you're on the go. No reading required. Subscribe for free at mercola.com for the latest health insights.
Looking for trusted health wisdom you can hold in your hands? Discover the life-changing books of Dr. Joseph Mercola at joyhousepublishing.com. These titles bring decades of natural health research into practical steps for better energy, stronger immunity, and clearer thinking. Take charge of your health with guidance rooted in science and experience. Visit joyhousepublishing.com now and claim your bonuses while they are available.
Hello and welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom.
It's great to be here.
Today, we're going on a bit of a mission, and honestly, it feels a lot like detective work.
It really does. We're looking at a paper, Seed Oils as a Hypothesized Contributor to Heart Disease, a narrative synthesis.
Right, and I know that sounds maybe a little academic.
It does, but the implications are so practical. I mean, this might be one of the biggest missing links in how we understand modern disease.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the correlation between, well, the introduction of industrial seed oils
And the massive, massive rise in heart disease we saw in the 20th century.
It's a huge topic, so let's just jump right in. I want to start with the before picture.
A baseline.
Yeah, the baseline, because I think we all have this assumption that people have always just sort of, had heart issues.
That it's just a normal part of aging.
Exactly, the price of getting older. Can you set the stage for us? What did the health landscape actually look like before the 1900s?
This is where the story gets really interesting, and it really challenges everything we think is normal.
Okay.
If you look at the historical data, heart disease was incredibly rare before the 20th century.
You don't mean just like slightly less common?
No. I mean, it was a medical curiosity.
Define curiosity. Are we talking about something doctors just weren't good at diagnosing yet?
That's a great question, and it's a common counter-argument. But the historical record, it just doesn't support that. Well, we're talking about figures like Sir William Osler. He's one of the fathers of modern medicine, right? Practicing at Johns Hopkins in the late 1890s.
Mm-hmm.
He reviewed hospital records and found that cases of angina, chest pain from heart disease were just astonishingly scarce.
So it wasn't just that they were missing it.
No. A doctor could go their entire career and maybe see a handful of cases total.
That is genuinely hard to wrap my head around. I feel like for most of us, for you listening right now, we've grown up where heart disease is statistic number one.
It feels inevitable.
Yeah. It's like you get older, your arteries clog, your heart gets tired. That's just biology.
And that is the exact assumption this paper is challenging. It makes this very specific, very crucial point.
Which is?
This wasn't a sudden biological failure. Biology just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Human genes don't spontaneously malfunction across the whole planet in, 3 or 4 generations?
Right. Evolution takes thousands of years. So if our genes haven't changed, but the outcome has,
The variable has to be environmental.
the machinery is the same.
Precisely. The inputs changed. And they changed radically.
So if the machinery didn't break, something must have been thrown into the gears.
That's a great way to put it.
Which brings us to the turning point, the 20th century.
Right.
What specifically happened? Something had to trigger this surge.
This is the pivotal moment. As the calendar turned into the 1900s and as the decades progressed,
Okay.
specifically past, say, 1910 and then really into the 1950s, the rates of heart disease didn't just creep up.
No.
They skyrocketed. We saw a complete transformation. It went from a rarity to the #1 killer in the Western world.
And this is where the detective work really kicks in. So we have our crime scene, the 20th century. We have the victim, our heart health.
Right.
Who's the prime suspect? Because people usually point to things like, oh, we stopped walking as much or we started smoking.
And those are factors, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But this narrative synthesis argues that the timeline, it correlates most strictly with a massive shift in the food supply.
Okay, so a specific shift.
A very specific one. The introduction and then the eventual dominance of industrial seed oils.
Industrial seed oils. Let's just clarify what that means for everyone. We're talking about soybean oil, corn oil, canola, cottonseed.
Exactly. What they often brand as vegetable oils.
Yeah.
And that word dominance is key.
Why dominance?
We're not talking about a small change. The research shows these oils became a dominant part of the food supply during this exact period where disease rates just exploded.
And before 1900,
They didn't exist in the human diet. Simple as that.
It's funny when you say industrial seed oils, it sounds like something from a factory, not a kitchen.
Well, historically, that's true, and that's a key insight here.
Yeah.
Before they were food, many of these, like cottonseed oil, were waste products,
Waste products from what?
the textile industry, or they were used for, machinery lubrication.
So to turn that into something you could eat.
Requires heavy industrial processing, high heat, high pressure, petroleum-derived solvents like hexane. It's a completely different process than just, say, pressing an olive.
A stark contrast to how humans got their fat for thousands of years before that.
Right. For millennia, it was animal fats, tallow, lard, butter. But to get oil out of a soybean, you need a factory.
And perfectly in sync with that flood of new processed fats, heart disease just spikes.
Correct. The paper is asking us to just look at the two timelines, lay one on top of the other.
And when you do that,
The match is, it's striking. We basically swapped stable ancestral fats for unstable industrial fats in a very, very short window of time.
I want to dig into that idea of dominance a bit more. Because when people hear dietary change, they might think, oh, we ate more sugar.
Right, or more fast food.
But this is pointing a finger at a fundamental alteration of the food itself, isn't it? It's not just what we eat, but the chemical structure of it.
It is. This was not a tweak. It was a structural change in our cellular fuel. So
Yeah.
when the research argues, this points to a long-term dietary driver.
What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. It means we're looking at something consumed consistently over decades by almost everyone. And chemically, these oils are very different. They're incredibly high in something called linoleic acid.
Linoleic acid. Okay, that's a term we need to remember. Why is that specific molecule so important here?
This is really the core insight. Linoleic acid is an omega-6 polyunsaturated fat. And our bodies need a tiny amount of it, sure.
A tiny amount.
Historically, we got maybe 1 to 2% of our calories from it. With seed oils, that number jumped to 10, 20, sometimes even higher.
So we're overdosing on something that should be a trace nutrient.
We're flooding the system. And the problem with linoleic acid is that it is highly unstable. It oxidizes really easily.
Okay.
So when you build your cell membranes out of this unstable fat, it's like building the walls of your house out of dynamite instead of brick.
That is a terrifying visual, building your house out of dynamite. So you're saying our actual physical structure is changing?
Yes. Your cells have to use the building blocks you give them. You give them stable fats, you get stable cells. You give them unstable seed oils,
You get unstable cell.
prone to inflammation and damage. And this brings us to this idea of accumulation.
Right, that phrase, long-term dietary driver. It implies these oils don't just pass through us.
They do not. That's the scary part. Linoleic acid has a very long half-life in our body fat.
How long?
It can take years, maybe up to 6 or 7 years, to clear out just half of what you've stored. So as the population ate more, decade after decade,
The concentration in our bodies just went up and up.
in lockstep with the rise in chronic disease, yes.
So you can't just fix this with a weekend detox.
No, it's a bioaccumulation issue. It took decades to fill up this reservoir, and that explains why these health issues are so persistent. We have fundamentally altered the composition of human body fat compared to the year 1900.
And just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, we are not saying, hey, go out and grab some vegetable oil.
Absolutely not. The complete opposite. The hypothesis is that these oils are the contributor to the disease.
The cause of the problem.
Yes. We're investigating them as the agent of chaos, not the solution.
Right. It's like finding the lead pipe in the library with Colonel Mustard. We are identifying the weapon.
That's the perfect analogy. We're identifying the biochemical weapon that was introduced into our food.
Hi, friends. We're trying out a new podcast style for a limited time, and we truly love your feedback. If you're enjoying this format, please let us know in the comments.
Okay, we're back. I want to shift gears slightly and go back to the title of the paper. A narrative synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds a bit like a literature class. Why is that term so important? Why not just call it a clinical trial?
That is a really important distinction. A narrative synthesis means you're looking at the whole story of the data.
The story.
Yeah. See, a randomized clinical trial is great, but it's usually short. You can't lock people in a lab for 40 years to see if an oil gives them heart disease.
Right. Totally unethical and impossible. Who would sign up for that?
Exactly. So science can get very reductionist. We look at one cell in a petri dish or one cholesterol marker for 6 weeks, and that's valuable,
You
but
can miss the forest for the trees.
you can miss the forest for the trees. A narrative synthesis steps back. It looks at the history, the epidemiology, the changes in farming, the chemistry we just talked about,
All of it together.
and weaves them together to see the overall pattern.
So instead of just zooming in with a microscope, we're zooming out to look at the timeline of humanity over the last century.
Exactly. It's crucial because we don't live in a petri dish. We live in history. We live in societies where food systems change.
So you can't understand the sudden rise in heart disease without understanding the sudden change in the narrative of our diet.
That's it. You have to look at the transition from butter and lard to Crisco and margarine. You can't understand the end of the movie if you miss the first hour where the villain was introduced.
And in this case, the villain was introduced and marketed as progress.
Precisely. Marketed as a cleaner, modern alternative to those old-fashioned animal fats.
But I have to play the skeptic for a second.
Please do. Critical thinking is key here.
Is it possible this is all just a giant coincidence? I mean, so many things changed in the 20th century. Cars, radio, synthetic clothes.
Asphalt on the roads.
Right.
Right.
How do we know it's the oils? Are we just confusing correlation with causation?
That is always the million-dollar question in science. Correlation does not prove causation.
The rooster crowing doesn't make the sun rise.
Exactly. However, the argument here is compelling because of the nature of the correlation and something called biological plausibility.
Biological plausibility. Okay,
Yeah.
break that down for me.
Well, first, just look at the before and after. We have this distinct period of rarity, the before,
Right.
then the oils are introduced, and then immediately after the surge. But the plausibility comes from the mechanism we talked about.
Oxidation. The dynamite in the walls.
Exactly. Asphalt on the roads doesn't enter your mitochondria. Radio waves don't become the wall of your cells. But food literally becomes you.
We are what we eat.
And specifically, the fats we eat are used to build our cell membranes. So if you eat unstable, easily oxidized fats,
You build unstable cell walls.
and if you have a disease like heart disease, which is characterized by inflammation and oxidative stress,
You have to look for something that drives inflammation and oxidative stress.
and industrial seed oils fit that profile perfectly. Better than sugar, better than lack of exercise, and certainly better than asphalt.
It's the aha moment. It's realizing that maybe we haven't just been unlucky. Maybe we've been actively fueling the fire.
And this explains the failures of all the standard advice, right? We've been told to cut saturated fat for 50 years, and yet heart disease is still number one.
Still the #1 killer.
If the clogged pipe theory of saturated fat were correct, then swapping butter for margarine and corn oil should have fixed everything.
But it did the exact opposite.
It seems like it poured gasoline on the fire, which suggests our whole understanding of the root cause was flawed.
So what does this all mean for us today? Sitting here listening, I'm thinking about the grocery store.
Yeah.
Why does this history lesson matter right now?
It matters because it completely reframes the problem. If you believe heart disease is just inevitable,
That your body is just destined to fail.
then you're powerless.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for your turn, taking your pills, crossing your fingers.
Hoping for good genes?
But if you accept this hypothesis, that heart disease is driven by a long-term dietary factor, these seed oils, then suddenly you have agency.
It puts the steering wheel back in your hands.
It does, but practically it's tough, right? I mean, these oils are in everything.
Everything. Salad dressings, crackers, restaurant food, even supposed healthy snacks.
They are. But if the surge was caused by a change in the food supply, it suggests the condition itself isn't inevitable, it's a consequence.
Not a mystery, a consequence.
Consequence of choices made in the food industry. And as a consumer, understanding that history lets you look at a label and see it differently.
You don't just see an ingredient.
You see the historical driver of a health crisis. You realize that bottle of heart-healthy vegetable oil might be the very thing undermining your health.
It really changes your perspective on the modern diet. We think modern means better, advanced.
But in this case, modern might just mean compromised. Just because something is new doesn't mean it's compatible with our ancient biology. The 20th century was a massive, uncontrolled experiment in human nutrition.
And the results of that experiment.
The results were, frankly, disastrous for heart health. We traded stability for shelf life and cheap production costs, and our biology paid the price.
So, to recap, because we've covered a lot, we started with a mystery. Why is heart disease so common now when it used to be rare?
And we established that it was, in fact, rare before the 1900s, before these oils,
Then we saw the massive surge in the 20th century.
and identified the hypothesized culprit that entered the scene at the exact same time: industrial seed oils.
We talk about how this wasn't a biological failure, but a dietary one, leading to fragile cells and oxidative stress.
And finally, we realize this whole narrative gives us a framework to understand our own health, not as victims of bad luck, but as participants.
It's a lot to digest, but it's also hopeful in a strange way. If we broke it, maybe we can fix it.
That is the thought I want to leave everyone with. It raises a really fascinating question to think about.
Okay.
If the introduction and dominance of these oils was the main factor that tipped the scales, if we were to remove that factor,
If we took the suspect out of the lineup.
exactly, if we revert that specific dietary driver, could we potentially return to the heart health status of the pre-20th century?
Is the damage reversible?
That's the provocative thought. Is it reversible just by removing the catalyst? It puts the future of your health squarely in your own hands.
That is a huge question, and I think it's one worth exploring. Thank you for listening to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.